You are listening to yet another episode of my podcast. I'm Emes, and here with me today, Q the physicist.
Oh, good evening, good afternoon, good morning.
For those who don't yet know him, he's an awesome liquid funk DJ on a site called tnbheaven.com. It's a great pleasure to have you here, my man.
Oh, thank you, sir. Thank you.
How
It's
are you
good to be
doing?
here. Oh, I'm fine, actually. It's a little bit. It's morning.
Morning.
Yeah. I didn't get up so long ago.
Well, I'm not used to getting up, so I know the feeling, man. Feel for your brother. So I mentioned you being a DJ, which is going to be the major part of this interview. But is there anything more you would like to tell about yourself before we start with a big thing?
Yeah, so I'm an American who lives in Budapest. I have been a musician. I've worked on TV. I'm an English teacher, so sort of a jack of all trades, master of none. But basically, I started DJing about 5-6 years ago, just kind of because I wanted to hear my own tunes, the funk or the drum and bass, and then I started making my own mixes, and then eventually I started to become a DJ.
I think we're going to get there, but maybe tell something unusual about yourself, something that people don't know.
Well, there's tons of things people don't know and unusual. I play the violin, and I'm a
Okay,
black guy.
good one. Yeah, he's black. That's awesome. I don't know many black people, so okay. Sidetracked. Let's start at the beginning.
Okay.
What about your relationship with music and your starts? Like I heard something that you start as a choir boy.
Oh yeah,
That
well, I've had lots of things in my life that were musical. When I was a kid, I played the violin, and I also sang in a gospel choir when I was in elementary school and junior high school in my church. So I learned to sing. Oh, well, I wasn't a great singer. I'm not a great singer now, but I did sing. And then later, I didn't do anything in college, and then I came to Europe. And after I lived in Europe for about 10 years, then I joined a band again. And well, no, I actually started a band early on here. When I first got here, I met an American guy who was a drummer, and he and I suggested to have a band together. So we did that, and so that was probably in '93. So I've been in different bands since '93 in so 20 years basically. And I've had different kinds of music as well. So some of it was a mixture of country and funk. That was the first band, and then I was in a rock band, and then I was in this kind of ethno jazzy rocky band, which was kind
I
of
see.
different. And then I was with a real jazz saxophonist who asked me to read poems in his shows. So I've done a ton of different musical stuff. None of it big, and none of it well known or whatever. But I have fun doing it.
Speaking of the choir boy, is it like the traditional choir we can see in the movies? Like
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah,
black
absolutely.
churches, the energy going.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. People used to pass out in my church.
Oh,
Yeah, it's totally like if you watch Blues Brothers and that James Brown scene. I mean, it's
oh
exactly like that
man,
when I was going to church.
I love that. I just love the idea of that. It must be something really, really awesome, different experience to anything else.
Yeah, well, it all depends on your perspective. Let's say that.
Okay, sounds interesting.
Yeah.
Tell me something about that, about the perspective.
Oh, what I
What's
mean
what's
is
your
I'm
perspective
I'm
about
an
it?
atheist, and so I felt like
Oh,
as I look back on that, I spent a lot of time in church, and it was often very hot. Because
oh,
I'm from Sacramento, California, and in the summertime it's hot, so you've got a suit on, you've got a robe over that, and you are moving around in a very stuffy small church. Uh, you know, I don't want to go into the whole thing about being an atheist, but ultimately that's what I mean by it's your perspective.
I understand. Well, I'm personally agnostic, but you see, I'm something in between agnostic and atheist. But still, there's some energy going on. The people singing, and it's really something else. That's just my perspective as an outsider.
Yeah,
Maybe
I
if
know
I,
people like that whole feeling of it, but
yeah,
I mean, if you're doing that every Sunday and you're not really believing the stuff that's being told, I mean, that's a different issue, right? So, I
that's
mean, I
true. That
understand why
makes
people
sense.
like gospel, and I like gospel too, to a certain degree, but it's church music, so.
True. So, uh, what music do you like in general, apart from drum and bass? I know you mentioned
None,
some.
none.
None. No jazz.
No. So the thing is that once I'm a kind of dude who gets into a certain kind of music, and that's it. So, for example, there was a rock band named Hum from Chicago, and when I discovered that band, they sang about as if they were astronauts and it was a real heavy. It was great, and they had a great. It was very distorted guitars. I mean, it was a real rock band, postmodern rock, I guess you could call it. And when I discovered that, I played the same album for 2 years, pretty much every day. And so I have these periods, and now I'm in the drum and bass period, so I don't really listen to anything else. I mean, if I were to say what I like, I would probably say salsa and true funk from the 70s. Right. Salsa from the 50s, Cuban salsa, because it's danceable. And I basically it's about dancing for me, so I like to dance. I don't do it so much anymore because I'm older, but, I mean, that's the whole part of it. It's about making a party, so I like to go to parties, and so ultimately I like party music. Yeah, essentially.
Party guy.
But, music it's based on your mood. I mean, it's based on my mood anyway, so it's a question. It's not that I hate music, it's that do I ever have the mood to listen to this other kind of music? And the answer for most other kinds of music is no.
Yeah, it depends on personality and feeling. I agree with that. Let's get into drum and bass in general. How did you become a DJ? You said you moved from America to Europe.
Oh yeah, and I was in all those bands, but and actually I was in a band in the late '90s as well, kind of as a side, which kind of played drum and bass. So my first exposure to it was being in that band. But when I was in it, right, when they showed me what drum and bass was, I had been in a real band, or I was concurrently in a real band as well. When I say real band, I mean with guitars.
I understand, like live music. Yeah.
Yeah, and ultimately, I didn't like this drum and bass thing because basically we were a band with this guy playing the samples and stuff, and I was like, this is not real music, So I really rejected any kind of DJ music in the 90s. It's ironic, of course, that I'm a DJ now.
It's kind of interesting development because I know many people who resent anything electronic, anything that comes from PC production, DJing, whatever.
Yeah,
and
that's how I felt.
Stick with the guitars and stuff.
That's exactly how I felt. And then I went to a party here in Budapest of LTJ Bookham and MC
he was
Conrad.
There personally.
Yeah. They were on stage, and I had never, I had no idea who they were, but I was at the show, and MC Conrad has incredible presence. So I looked at that and I was like, oh, this is something a little bit different. And the party lasted a long time. So, we got there at like 9:30 and came out at like 5 in the morning. So this was a whole new experience for me in terms of what a party's about. And I realized, you go to see a band, and a band's on for an hour, and then they play some background music for a while, or a couple of bands, or you go home. And in this case, it was like, oh, so it's an all-night party with a bunch of DJs. I'm really into that. So that was kind of, I liked the whole party aspect of it. It reminded me, that's what I used to do in college. And then once I went down to Serbia to go to a festival, and they, one of these big festivals in Eastern Europe, and they organized, it was like a 9-day festival back in 2001, and it was mostly DJs. So it was like all kinds of different styles of DJs, but they were all there. So it was, it was, and from around the world, right? So all the techno DJs and house DJs, and they still do that festival down there, Exit. And so I went there, and after a long trip there, I mean, I was away for something like 30 hours, and I traveled for 15 from Hungary. It was a long, long trip. And I got there, and I said, I'm not going to go to the festival because I'm too tired, blah, blah, blah. And I told my friends that, and they were like, no, you got to go because Ronnie Size is playing. And I had no idea who Ronnie Size was, but I went anyway. And while I was when Ronnie Size came out on stage, I didn't even know who Ronnie Size was, like whether it was the DJ or the MC, because there was an MC there. And the MC came out as a woman, and she said, she just grabbed the mic and said, "Okay, hello, Serbia." And then, "Are you ready?" And I was like, okay, what's this going to be? And they just started straight into, Ronnie Size drum and bass. And it probably within the first minute, I was like, oh, this is it. This is the sound that, that I've been looking for. I mean, it was incredibly good. And he played for something like 4 hours. So it was a big stage, and there was a ton of people there, and people were interacting.
What year was that?
Yeah, 2001.
Oh, so you're a DJ since then?
No. This is just how I discovered drum and bass.
Oh, right. Okay.
And so this is important because ultimately, after that, as I said, I have like moods, and I have like periods where I listen to different kinds of music, and then I started listening to drum and bass pretty much exclusively then because of Ronnie Size. After I discovered that, and then I started to, and I also had the net, so I started to try to find songs. And so from, say, 2001 to 2000, I think, 2005, I just listened. I started listening to stuff on the radio. Again, the internet facilitated that because now I could, surf for I could download anything and listen to the radio, and it was great. So I was into it. And then, so I started going to parties. And when I was at parties, I started hearing some really great tunes and stuff, and I was frustrated that I couldn't ask people what the DJs really, what tune is that? So that was one thing that was difficult for me. And then I went to this is how I started to be drum and bass. And I went to this party once, and after I'd been listening for a while, so I kind of knew the music. And they switched DJs during the party. And the first DJ was really, really great, and then the next one was really, really bad. And I remember standing there thinking, that's it. That's it. I'm sick of going to parties, because that happened before. And I said to myself, I'm sick of going to parties and listening to music where the mixes have songs I don't like. There must be a way that I can make my own mixes. And so I went home from that party, immediately got home, didn't even go to sleep, and I tried to find a program, and I found one, a virtual DJ, and I started making mixes.
Right.
I had some songs downloaded by that time, so I started making some mixes. And at the same time, I joined Second Life, and then...
All right, yeah, you mentioned that before.
Yeah,
you started DJing at Second Life.
Yeah, because when I was in the game, I saw somebody discovering how to be a DJ. So I was like, oh, that could be cool, like, some virtual thing where I could DJ. So I did that for 2 years, and I did it live, so I was streaming from my house into the game. And that 2 years taught me how to DJ. And I'd read about stuff, but I just practiced. And then a guy, an artist here, a painter, asked me to play at his party in a bar, right? So I just brought my computer down there and sat at the bar and played some music. And that was my first live show. And so from that point on, I realized, I can do this. And so I did. And then I just started, making contacts, talking to people who like drum and bass. And then eventually, you build up some contacts. And then, someone invites you to a party when they hear your mix. And eventually it goes on from there.
And then you got to DNB Heaven.
Well, I started looking for. So after I played live, I started to think, well, maybe I could do this online. And then I found a place called Future Frequency, futurefrequency.com, and they allowed me to put on some mixes. So for a year, I did just mixes, and I made them at home, studio mixes, and then uploaded them there. And I got a little bit of a following. And then I thought, okay, I'll just do it live because I have the equipment for that. So I'll just do it live. And so ultimately that's what happened. So I looked around. I actively looked for websites which were advertising for DJs, and I found dnbheaven.com. And he said, submit a mix, and we'll see how it goes. And so I had done live mixes on the Second Life, so I showed him one of those, and he was like, "Okay, it's good enough." So,
and by he you mean Hectic Scale?
Oh, sorry, yeah, Hectic Scale, who runs DNB Heaven, yeah. And so he said, "Yeah, okay, you can do it." And so. Yeah, I'm now into my 215th or 16th set. So
and what was the year when you started?
Well, that was 215 weeks ago at least. So I think that was right 2008 maybe, 2008 or 2009, maybe somewhere around there. So I think maybe 2009 I think I got on there. So I've been on the station for 3 years, on DNB Heaven for 3 years now. And in that time with being on DNB Heaven, I started to meet other DJs and producers. And then SoundCloud came around, and SoundCloud also allowed me to...
There's another topic I'd like to talk about. Yeah. Well, I think it's quite enough about how did you become a DJ. Let's maybe talk about drum and bass in general, okay, about the genre and stuff.
Okay.
You as a DJ, how do you perceive the differences between, let's say, some sort of a feeling of drum and bass in, let's say, Serbia, Hungary, Czech Republic, I don't know, Great Britain? Are there big differences, in tastes?
Yeah, I think what's going on is, okay, so let's take drum and bass. You've got a bunch of subgenres within drum and bass which have their own names, but they're not as big genres online as they could be yet. So they're not separate. They're all under drum and bass. But you have like a liquid type. That's kind of I play, the funk drum and bass. And then you have the hard, some tech step and neurofunk, a little bit harder. Then you have some really crazy technoid kind of DMB. And, so there are different jungle. There's jungle as well. And what's going on is different countries are into different types. And I think it's to do with...
Yeah, that's what I'm interested.
Yeah, so
tell me something.
Yeah, so basically, like, if you go to Romania and Czech Republic... So I played in all these places. This is my own experience. But in Romania and Czech Republic, they do like liquid funk. Hungary, not so much. I mean, it's starting to come in now, but Hungary's much more a tech step neurofunk thing because one of the DJs here was playing neurofunk and he got big, and so I think a lot of people followed him, and then they got into the music through him.
So you think it's because of the DJ? It's not because some sort of like I don't know, like vibes amongst the countries?
Yeah, no. I think it's because of the DJs, and when a DJ gets big, and they know it, so the people who are into the underground music know one of their own got big in whatever type of music it is. Then I think people follow that. Because I think that although drum and bass is underground, I think it still works in the same way that any mainstream fan base would work, and that is that you like who you like the songs so people like their own, so it's kind of like in any pop in pop music when people they separate in their minds like the local,
almost like following a sports team. When someone is popular in your surroundings, then you support the sports team.
That's one part of it. But I think what's going on as well is there's a separation between, so you think of local bands, and I like, so in Hungary people would say, oh, I like these Hungarian bands, and then I like these bands, right? So you separate those two, and I think that's what happened in drum and bass too. But some of the guys who were being separated out, right? So if you knew Chris Sue when he was starting out, then you liked him because he was Hungarian, and then he became world famous, so now you have now it's even more pride, right? So, and so I think each country, I personally think that's how they get into it. But obviously, the culture itself drives that because the guy lives in that culture, or the girl, they live in that culture, the producers, and so they probably are influenced in the first place of why they make the music, and that's probably connected to what.
One more thing we mentioned, I think we mentioned that yesterday when we chat around on Skype. Then there may be some bigger differences between like countries. Let's say for example Russia, and it's more, let's say, techie. Compared to France and Italy, where there's almost none drum and bass.
Yeah, that's right. Producers. I mean, there's very. It's funny because I'm not saying there's not drum and bass there, but it doesn't, So actually, I don't know where every single producer comes from, but I have checked that in the past, and I just did not see Spanish, Portuguese. There's an Italian named Crix. She's a woman. That's one I know, but. I mean, it seems like Eastern Europe is a hotbed of it, and Russia is a big place for it. And I wouldn't say just technoid, although that's a big part of it. But even in Siberia, they've got a liquid drum and bass label. I mean, in a place called Chelyabinsk. I mean, that's pretty far out. And you've got like DJs from Kazakhstan who are well known. Liquid. I'm talking about liquid now. Kazakhstan, Moldova. So. There's even now a new guy from Nigeria. Not Nigeria, Kenya, from Nairobi.
Oh, Africans.
First dude, awesome. And there's a guy on DNB Heaven he's smaller, but he was from Tunisia, and those are the first Africans I knew at all. And then there's a lot of Americans involved in it, but I think it's really underground. I think it's really underground in the States.
I don't want to interject into what you're saying, but there's another thing I wanted to ask. Let's say the big differences between American drum and bass scene and European. I know the European scene is massive and it varies in different aspects, but let's say the big differences between these two.
Well, I think it's much smaller in the United States. I mean, the United States is driven by mainstream music, so most people listen to that. So this is very, very underground, and I think a lot of people think of it as kind of European music. Though, having said that, there are a number, especially in Liquid, there are a number of really good producers from the United States and from Canada, and they, for the most part, they are mostly funk-oriented kinds of producers. Okay, now you can say, oh well, Q, you don't know anything about the other types of music, but and that's true, but Diesel Boy and stuff played something different, and then there's Evan and I forgot that guy's name. There's a few who played tech step too, but. I mean, it seems to me that the ones who are bigger are like Random Movement or Mutt, and these guys are playing basically remixing funk tunes or R&B tunes now into drum and bass, right? And I think
it could be maybe a bit cultural thing,
It is because those are big tunes. Those are big types of genres in the States. Black music dominates in some way in the United States, so. And it always has, right? It's for the 20th century. So jazz and all that stuff. Blues, you can just mention a bunch of
we can move a bit. We mentioned SoundCloud,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
whole
of course.
development of internet and drum and bass. What do you feel about that?
Well. So originally when people were starting to make mixes, it was hard to upload your mix. It took a long time. You didn't have a good connection, and it was very difficult. You had to actually manually find people, right? There was no way. There was no social media at the time, and then Facebook came around. First MySpace came around, and people started interacting there, and then they went into Facebook, and then SoundCloud came up, and SoundCloud is
Massive revolution for us.
Yeah, because it's
I
a
think
music
so.
revolution for everyone, because you can put up your music there and instantly people can hear it, and then you can send a message to anyone you want anytime you want. So and so I started doing that. So I started listening to music and then finding out that people, every time they make a new tune, they immediately put it up on SoundCloud. So you have a whole body of music now that you can get for free from the producers. And then play it, and they're happy to have you play it. So, I mean, this has changed the way music works, and drum and bass is part of that. So
I agree.
The community has grown incredibly.
There's a massive change. I think now it's more open. It's not like excluded. When someone makes a song, they usually want DJs to play it, to promote it, to show it around. Not in opposite, and that's a massive step, I think, compared to mainstream music. When they make album or something, they just want to sell it. They don't want people just to pass around it or something.
Yeah, I'm not going to say that all DJs, though. I mean, some DJs are at the commercial level, so they also want to sell their stuff. But I think
that makes sense, of course. But I'm saying that if you actually make DJs play it, then people can buy it even more because they hear it more. That's at least my perspective.
Yeah, although I mean, I've talked to some producers and stuff, and I know that the money that they make for a tune, even if they're selling it on Juno or on any digital Beatport or whatever, they're not making a lot of money. So I think that's a part of the reason why a lot of people are prepared to give their stuff away for free, and that's become more prevalent on SoundCloud. I've seen a lot more people giving their tunes away for free, because I think ultimately a DJ, if he's going to try to live off this, he's going to make his money or she's going to make her money from going to shows. And so that I think is what you're saying is correct, that they want people to play it, but not everyone does, because then you've got like this whole dub plate thing. So there's like a DJ, a producer who makes some tune, and then he will selectively give it to a few DJs and to play it, and then it's an exclusive thing. So there's like a lot of that going on. People want to be making exclusive tunes and stuff. I like to do that as well. I mean, I get a lot of stuff from Euphorics, and he's a really good liquid drum and bass producer. And so, it's kind of cool if you are the only one who has that tune, and then people ask about it, and you say, well, I got it right from the producer, right? So,
all right. So I think that's about SoundCloud. Let's talk a bit about dubstep, and maybe why do you think it blended with mainstream like it has?
Because it sucks. I hate dubstep. And yeah, and
nice.
The truth
I got that from many people, by the way. I think Detroit Ravers said the same thing. It's interesting.
I think to be honest with you, I think it got in there because it's not so upbeat, right? So drum and bass is like very syncopated and the complicated beats, and I think the little I've heard of dubstep, it's basically like, for me, pop music with a big fat deep bass in it, which people like. I mean, I'm not going to deny that people like that sound, but I mean, if you listen to dubstep now, anything that's even commercial will throw in some kind. They'll get some dude to take their jingle and then distort it with some deep bass, some deep dubstep kind of bass. And I went to a couple of dubstep parties early on, and my issue is you cannot dance to that. So what's the point, right? If I'm going to be in a party, I mean, I understand people like it, but for me, if I'm going to be in a party and I'm talking about 6 hours party, I want something that's going to move me, not something that's going to make me leave and go and get a beer, right? So
I know. Well, I respect these opinions, but I personally really like the genre. Well, not really like. I like drum and bass more, but I wouldn't say it's bad. But I guess that depends on personality.
Yeah, but as I said earlier, I'm a music snob, so there's no way. And I don't. And
that's okay. I'm just expressing my opinion.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I mean, I'll tell you the truth. The fact is that when you're a DJ, I mean, you really don't have. The truth is, I think you really don't have time. If you're serious about it, you don't have time to be listening to a lot of other genres, because if you're serious about what you're doing, you got to be listening to all the new songs that come out in your genre, right? You got to be on top of that, I think, and so that takes time. Actually listening to music takes time. So, I mean, if I'm going to be listening to dubstep, it means I'm not listening to drum and bass, and that means I'm not learning new drum and bass tunes. So,
makes sense in a way.
I feel like it's a duty. You know, I think as a DJ, you are there to sift through all the crap and get the best tunes and play those, and that takes time, right? So we sift through all the crap so you don't have to.
Well, you as a listener.
You as a listener, exactly, and right. We as DJs.
All right. So, can you see drum and bass happening to drum and bass something similar that happens to dubstep? You know, at least partial blending with mainstream. I know there were already some tracks that kind of appeared in mainstream radios from drum and bass, but can you see some similar thing happening eventually?
Yes and no. Yes, it already happened. So drum and bass was the first to get into mainstream around 2000, 2001 in Britain, right? So it became that's the whole London electricity thing, because they were pushing that, and people knew drum and bass tunes. So there was the marquee tune LK, which became kind of popular in a little bit outside of the drum and bass circle. So drum and bass has had its day, and I guess it's not coming back. So,
is it good or bad? Do you like it staying in underground, or would you like to have it, you know, out on the open?
So to be honest with you, that part I like the underground aspect of it, but it doesn't matter to me, because all I care about is the music, and I like this music. So even if it were mainstream, I would not be ashamed to say that I like it, because I simply do, right? And that's it. I mean, it's not about. For me, it's not about, you know, some identification in some way like that. You know, like I do say that drum and bass and everything else is just music. So I do identify with, you know, outside of just the music. But ultimately, it's the music. So I like it, and that would be the end of it. So whether it's mainstream or not, I wouldn't care. The only possibility if it becomes mainstream, though, is that the quality goes down. So if that were to happen, then no. So if that's one part of it, then I don't want that to happen.
I guess we're done for today. Okay. Thanks to you once more for joining me.
Always Thanks for having me.
And I suggest you listeners to check out the upcoming show. It's going to be a lot of fun. So thanks for listening, and bye-bye.
All right, ciao.